Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt and this is the Ioniq 6. And last week we were in the cousin Ioniq 5. But let's say you want a little bit more range and maybe you want to spend even a little bit less money. Well, Hyundai's got something for you. So today we're going to show you everything that you need to know about the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now first we're going to start with what is this thing and what does it compete against? Now this being an EV sedan, there actually isn't a lot to compete against it. It's very different from the Ioniq 5 then in that regard that we had last week, where it had about 6 other competitors. This, really kind of its only real competitor is the Tesla Model 3, and I guess you could kind of say the Polestar 2, but we talked about that in relation to the Ioniq 5 last week, so we'll focus mostly on the Model 3. But let's get EV stuff out of the way right away. Now, there's a couple flavors that you can get your Ioniq 6. And if you go for rear-wheel drive with the big battery, you can get 360 miles of range. This one, since it has dual motor and all-wheel drive, does about 270. However, I have been outperforming that, and the dash is showing 300 plus, which has actually been pretty accurate. But even if you get to the EPA 270 miles of range, that's still 10 more than you're going to get in the Ioniq 5 SUV twin. And a lot of that comes down to efficiency, which is a product of the shape. Now you can see, obviously, this is a lot more swoopy and less geometric and jagged design than you get in the Ioniq 5, which means it does about 103 mpge, whereas the Ioniq 5 does about 101. If you're going to compare that to the Tesla, though, it's still doing less. The Tesla will do up to 144 depending on motor and tire spec, and then something as low as 122. So the Model 3 will be more efficient, but this thing is still pretty good. And then we're back to my favorite little circle here, the charge port. You push that, you push your 6 little pixels here, which is very familiar, and we'll talk more pixels later, but then you have your charge port opening. Now this is built on Hyundai's updated eGMP architecture, which means 800 volts, which means it charges really fast. This thing will charge 10 to 80% in as little as 18 minutes if you can find a charger that will do that. This also is sold with a little adapter that you can plug into here, and you can charge things. You can use this as like a generator or like a mobile power bank to charge things. I use this example all the time. I lost power for 4 days at my house, and my sump pump was like a millimeter from overflowing, so if we got any more rain, I would have been in big trouble. But this would have taken care of that, because I could have plugged an extension cord in here and then powered my sump pump during the power outage. But then what about a Frunk? Most EVs have Frunks, right? Well, that's kind of becoming less and less true as new EVs come out, but your Ioniq 6 does come with a little storage up here. It's not huge, it's about the same size that you'd get in the Ioniq 5, but it doesn't have a lid like you would in the Ioniq 5. But you look closely, it says Ioniq here, and of course, the favorite shape, the pixel, is everywhere. Now, the Tesla Model 3 will give you a much bigger and more practical frunk, but I guess at least you have something here to charge or to bring your charging cables with you. But speaking of the pixels, this has been a theme since the Ioniq 5 came out, but there's actually way more pixels on the Ioniq 6 here, so we're going to do as best we can to give you a tour. In your frunk, in your windshield wiper array, in your headlights, in a couple different ways, like 3 different ways. You've got a charging status indicator in your lower fascia, on your wing mirror blinkers, in your touch-sensitive lock-unlock door handles, on the charging door in the back. These are strafes, but these, of course, are pixels, as you can see. Your entire full-width tail bar, yeah, of course, pixels. Trunk release, pixel. Reverse brake, pixels. Rear kick plate, pixels. Speaker covers in the rear, pixels. Rear cup holder insert, pixels. Front kick plate, pixels. Dead pedal, pixels. Now remember, in the Ioniq 5, this was the same pattern as your gas and brake. Look at that. You've also got plus and minus for go and stop. That's kind of funny. Unlike the Ioniq 5, no pixel designations on your seat though, except for your lumbar controls. And in the flooring of your center console, plus your wireless charger, cup holders, obviously, center console, and on your steering wheel. I'm genuinely convinced that if you just live with this, you will continue to find more and more pixels as the whole first year goes on. Exactly my point. I didn't even notice these in the dash. But believe it or not, pixels are not the only pattern on this car. This car is ribbed for your pleasure. Look at the design that you get on the dash. Now this actually isn't ribbed itself, but you look at the door card here, that is ribbed. And down here, the inside ribbed, not the outside, the inside is ribbed. And your rear door as well. And the Ioniq 6 here is actually the first one to bring us the new Hyundai key. As you can see, it's an egg shape. It looks exactly like the Hyundai logo. And you can also use a digital key, or your phone will function as a key, but if you want to use this, you will get Smart Park. So you got to hold this to turn the car on, and then you can control it going forward and back with the key. There it goes. There it goes. Release. It stops. Now obviously in Smart Park it's not very fast, but when you're actually driving it, it has some decent pace to it. Now this being the H-Track dual motor all-wheel drive means this is the most powerful Ioniq 6 that you can get so far. It does 320 horsepower and 446 pound-feet of torque. That means 0 to 60 is good for 4.5-ish seconds, just over, at a top speed of 115 miles an hour, so this is not slow. But then there's something interesting about the door cards. Not the fact that they're ribbed, but they are very pretty. But you see that's something that's not on here? You don't have mirror controls. They're here. And you also don't have window switches. This is very much like a Bronco or a Wrangler, where they've moved all the window switches to the center console here. Also your window lock, and you can see that your front two windows, those are auto up-down, but not your rears. You've also got your lock and unlock here on your center console too. Very Jeep of Hyundai here. Now I'm going to talk about the seats for a second. They are very comfortable and they look great in this, I think they call it gray, but it's basically white. It looks fantastic, but it's interesting here. You've got this little tab here that says Hyundai Ioniq 6 airbag, not an airbag to be put in any other car. But then the detailing continues here with this forest green that gently transitions into gold. Again, not something you're getting in the Ioniq 5. But then we step in, they're heated, they're cooled, but there's an interesting way that you go about doing that. All of your climate stuff is down here, but this is something we complained about in the Ioniq 5, it just said warmer. Now they've changed it to temp, seat, and steering wheel. So you press that to get into your heated and cooled seat controls and activate your heated steering wheel. A little annoying, and also, you don't get the recliner that you do in the Ioniq 5 here. But speaking of these screens, let's talk about them. Now, interesting, this does not get a head-up display. The Ioniq 5 had an augmented reality head-up display. The Ioniq 6 doesn't get it here, which is interesting. But you still have very big screens for your completely digital cluster, which is very nice. Doesn't change a whole lot, but it changes a little bit based on your drive mode. And also, your steering wheel will update with colors to correspond as you're changing. And then you've got your 12.3-inch infotainment system here. It's very good. It's a typical Hyundai system, which means you have a very nice 360 camera. Again, you're not going to be able to change the color. I do think the resolution on this is a little bit worse than the Ioniq 5, but it's very marginal if I'm nitpicking. Ultimately, a very, very good system. Now you still have wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. There's a rumor of an over-the-air update coming that will fix that and make it wireless, but for the meantime, you do have to plug in. But you still get great Hyundai stuff like quiet mode, which is going to kill the back speakers in case you have a child sleeping back there. And you can go over to your media and go into sources and sounds of nature. Love sounds of nature, lively forest, obviously the best one, but they have new ones. On a sailing ship. There's a little marimba going on. City at dawn. Very uplifting, very rom-com feeling. And experience the universe. This is very Neil deGrasse Tyson. It's almost kind of creepy. But again, look, pixels. I adjust the volume. What do I get? Pixels. They're everywhere, guys. And there's a couple things I didn't say about this earlier. Obviously, these light up. They don't in the Ioniq 5, but you have some cool information. You go to normal, you get blue flash, sport, red flash, eco, green flash. Very cool. But if you go into reverse, they go red. And then when you flip back into drive, they go back to blue. So this is just kind of cool. It'll also indicate your charge status on your steering wheel here. But one thing that is kind of the same as the Ioniq 5 is your gear selector here. It's like a bop it. So you spin it, push it, and just like panel roofs, you guys know that I love my ambient light. And this is the first Hyundai to come with dual color options. And it's gonna be hard to see here, I'll lay over B-roll clips, but this is the first time we've gotten two-tone in a Hyundai, which is really cool. And they're interesting names like Concentration. Imagine having Healing Forest on while you're listening to Lively Forest. Like, you'll be the most down-to-earth SOB on the planet. Wonderful Day. I mean, how do you not just have the best time in this car? Creative Moment. I need that. Custom dual color. And we mentioned it, it's not a totally panel roof, it's not completely glass like in the Tesla, but it feels big enough. And we talked about the frunk, but let's talk about the trunk. We'll open it here. It is powered, excellent, great, you love to see it. So it is in the Tesla as well. It's fairly deep. You've got just over 11 cubic feet of space. It's practical, it's a sedan trunk. 11-ish cubic feet of space. The only problem is that the Tesla Model 3 gets about almost 20 cubic feet of space in the trunk and another 3 cubic feet of space in the frunk. So this is going to be down on cargo. But you can drop the rear seats here, then you have a massive long opening there, and you have some additional storage under here for your charging cables if you don't want to put them in the frunk. But now I have to talk about one of my favorite features behind the wheel, and it's these paddles. These are your regen paddles. They almost look like little snails down here, but they control what level of regen you're doing. So you dial it all the way off, level 0, you're basically just free coasting. But the difference here with the Ioniq 6 versus the 5 is even on level 0, if you apply brake pressure, it will regen brake. You don't get that in the 5, it just uses the mechanical brakes, it seems, versus the regen motors. But of course you can dial it all the way up to level 4 or max or I-pedal, which will be like a 1-pedal driving. And then look at these controls right here. Now this is your HDAS 2.0 or your Hyundai Driver Assist System or Highway Drive, whatever they call it. It's their autopilot system. It's not going to be as robust as the Tesla, but they're also not charging you $1 million for it, and they're not calling it something that it isn't. It's very, very good. Hyundai typically probably occupies the top 5 in terms of our favorite driver assist suites. It's very good here. But one of the last things, we'll talk about the rear seats. Now we talked about the ribbing and the pixels and all that's very well and good. But you sit in here, I'm 6'1", people. I have more knee room than I would in like an S-Class, in an Audi A8. Brilliant knee room. Foot space is a little bit different. Since it's the battery under here, they've had to raise up the floor, which is also why the seating position is a little bit high. But huge amounts of space back here. I can cross my leg just fine. I've got climate vents here in the center console because it doesn't move like it does in the Ioniq 5. I've got USB-Cs, storage, map pockets, and it's just really nice and comfy back here. Brilliant back seat for 6-footers plus. I found more ribbing on the inside. And the last thing we'll talk about is price. Now the Ioniq 6 actually starts at exactly the same price as an Ioniq 5, $41,600. But this one, as spec'd, is $47,400, $47,500, so about $1,000 less than the Ioniq 5 we were in. So this will be a little less expensive than the 5, but it'll be pretty close. I think that's a good time to grab the key and go for a drive. Okay, we're going to normal, and then sport. Ooh, and then power. It's quick, rapid, 446, almost 450 pound-feet of torque, 320 horsepower. Brakes are pretty good. Turn in, fine, and then power. I mean, it's a good car, right? I really liked the Ioniq 5 last week. This is a similar experience. Honestly, the main difference is just what you're seeing in terms of the cabin design, and also I have a little bit less headroom. I've got EV6 levels of headroom in here, which is more a statement on the EV6 than the Ioniq 6 here, because wearing my little melon hat, I do hit my nub a little bit on the roof. Just something to be aware of. I can forgive that in something like a sedan like this, but in the EV6s, this is not a video about the EV6 though, so let's talk about the Ioniq 6. I just like it, you know? It's the only thing that I don't really like about it is just the styling, and mostly on the rear end, but the rest of it is brilliant. It's really natural and organic and easy to drive. I love the customizability that you have in the regen paddles. I cannot stand the 1-pedal driving on the Tesla. It's so abrasive, and maybe you get used to that, but I just like that you have so many different ways to customize and tailor this car to what you like. The steering is natural and organic, it's nice and quiet, but more than anything, just sitting in here, I'm having a better time. Like, I'm looking around and I have a cluster where my speed is. I don't have to look over here. The damping here is so much more sophisticated. The ride is better. Like, and I'm tired of the industry considering the Model 3 as like a premium or luxury tier vehicle. It's not. You sit in it for 5 minutes and you know that it's not. Now, I'm not saying that this is like Audi or Bentley level interior, but it's so much nicer than the Tesla. At least it's got different materials and colors and textures, and it's just more interesting. You know, the Tesla is a better car on paper. It's a better EV on paper, but I don't like to drive cars on paper. I like to drive cars in the real world. And what I experience here is more fun, more fulfilling than in the Tesla. And I think we're not gonna get too far into it, so I think now's a good time for the final thoughts. So those are the 25 things you need to know about the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now, if you're interested in how this thing competes against segment rival and benchmark, and really the only main competitor, the Tesla Model 3, well, check out our video that went live earlier on the channel this week. We'll see you there.